is a moment many older men recognize, even if they rarely talk about it. When you live without a girlfriend, life starts removing noise you once mistook for movement. Evenings stretch out. Your time answers only to you. And suddenly, the things you kept postponing finally have time to sit with you. Your value starts being seen through a different lens. Money, discipline, contribution, presence. The world responds with less noise, but clearer expectations. And then there is another truth most men are never prepared for. One that has nothing to do with status, routines, or how well your life looks from the outside. Your body does not always follow the same timeline as your expectations. Most men don't expect that truth to arrive quietly. They expect it to arrive clearly. Most times it doesn't. We will talk about that later. But first, let's start with what happens the moment life becomes less crowded and why older single men begin noticing the air differently than everyone else. Why older men notice the room differently. You finish your work and come home late, expecting the place to help you recover. But when you step inside, nothing is asking for your attention. No laughter, no one setting the table waiting for you. It's a feeling you recognize before you know how to explain it. Mostly out of habit, not panic. The habit isn't the phone, the habit is postponing the first honest thought of the night, just something to keep the evening moving. Some nights you're not even lonely. You're starting to notice patterns that no longer work. What changes isn't the atmosphere, it's the fact that fewer things are competing for your attention now. Suddenly, evenings no longer carry conversations, not even teasing remarks or quiet arguments. There is no one there, just a few parts of you asking for attention again. The unfinished thoughts, the dreams you shelved, the emotions that kept waiting for permission to speak. A man once said, "Nothing is wrong in the room. I just finally noticed how full my days used to be." Like realizing nothing was wrong with the chair once you stop shifting around. And strangely enough, once you get used to it, it feels more comfortable than most people expect. When other people start steering your life, have you noticed how easily small yeses slip into your schedule? Once you're single, people often read your calendar as empty, and they begin asking you for little favors more often than before. At first, you agree out of politeness. It feels easier than explaining your schedule to people who won't remember it anyway. Nods you give without thinking. Commitments you accept because they sound reasonable. They usually sound right up until they take charge of your week. It is like wearing a pair of shoes that look fine in the mirror, but feel slightly tight once you start moving. Bernard once told me, "I thought I was being responsible. Turns out I was just avoiding disappointment, not someone else's, his own." Saying yes becomes automatic. You can tell you're tired when your mouth says yes before your brain shows up. Saying no takes practice, even when it protects your time and clarity. When no one is watching, the real work begins. When you don't have a partner, life starts responding to you a little differently. People ask fewer personal questions. They start watching what you do. I once spoke with a man in his 50s who wasn't dating anyone. Once he was labeled long-term single, he learned that results were the only language left. So he spoke through his work. It was easier than explaining himself to people who were not really listening anyway. Sometimes he notices thoughts he doesn't feel the need to explain. He runs through a few names in his head. Then he lets the thought pass. How money speaks for you when you're single. When you're older and single, money changes how people approach you. Not emotionally, but practically. People assume you're stable. They expect you to cover your own ground. No one asks how tight things are. They simply watch how you move. Charles said his sister called him every year before the school term started. The conversation was warm, familiar, and predictable. It usually ended with money sent and long stretches without much contact after. And he accepts it as support for family, even as the closeness had changed. He laughed and said money helped people remember him, because without it, he wasn't sure they would. It was said as a joke. But jokes are often the safest way men tell the truth. People often assume a single man has fewer places to spend his money. Some take that assumption as permission to ask, without feeling the need to earn it themselves. What they don't see is how much extra effort it took to build the life he has now. Another case, Arthur once said, "When I was broke, people checked on me. When I became stable, they stopped asking and started assuming. People noticed my stability more than the path it took to build it." Do his words sound familiar when you look at your own life? You start checking in with yourself instead. How you feel, how your body is holding up, whether the day treated you fairly, and sometimes the answer is no. So you make dinner anyway, like a man who keeps moving forward regardless. Everything else slowly loses its grip on you. This is usually where a man begins building a life that answers to him, not to expectations. That does not mean you shut yourself off from the world. You still keep a small circle of genuine connections. People who valued you when things were tight and stayed when life became easier. For older men without anyone by their side, money isn't about status. It's about being able to stand steady in a world that expects you to. When the body still desires closeness. One of the truths older men rarely talk about is this: the body does not age at the same pace as expectation. Even without a girlfriend, the need for closeness does not disappear. It simply becomes harder to explain and easier to set aside. Recovery takes longer, but the desire for connection does not follow a strict schedule. It shows up quietly, often at unexpected moments. After his last meaningful relationship ended years ago, John often found himself torn. Part of him considered finding a woman just to meet that need, the same way some of his friends had. It was not about judgment. He simply knew that relationships at this age come with trade-offs, and not every price feels worth paying anymore. Some men try to stay constantly busy to keep it in the background, simply to avoid going home to a place. Then the desire appears out of nowhere, and resisting it is not as simple as it sounds. William once said his instincts felt like a restless child, never violent, just persistent, refusing to be ignored no matter how busy he stayed. Desire at this stage does not always come through romance. Sometimes it shows up through presence, shared effort, or being fully engaged with life. Setting it aside rarely works for very long, but what if it is not a nuisance at all, and instead a powerful source of energy pushing you forward? That question alone changes how you see it. Napoleon Hill explained it simply: when this urge is not acted on immediately, the same energy can be used to think more clearly, stay focused, and plan further ahead. What once drove a man toward release can become fuel for clearer thinking, better decisions in everyday life. How solo older men move through social connections. Most people assume men without girlfriends are lonely. What they rarely notice is how carefully these men choose who stays close. That choice usually comes from learning what actually lasts. You have learned that being around people does not always mean feeling supported. You are watching how people behave when nothing is required from you. A true friend challenges you with truth, not flattery. They speak honestly without trying to impress you. I have a small group of friends from college. We had not stayed in touch for years because life took us to different places. When one of us ran into a difficult time, the rest stepped in naturally. Nothing was discussed in detail. Everyone simply did what they could. That kind of friendship is rare. No scoreboard, no audience, just recognition of shared humanity. You do not forget moments like that. With time, an older man's judgment gradually sharpens as he stays engaged with the world around him. He learns quickly who is drawn to convenience and who respects his boundaries. When you stop entertaining people, some drift away while others stay. That difference usually shows up without any announcement. Most of us have felt that letdown at least once, mistaking a casual connection for something deeper until the person simply disappeared. Not because they are perfect, but because they are consistent. The strongest friendships tend to last without needing much maintenance. Low maintenance doesn't mean low cost. It often costs old assumptions. For solo older men, friendship is not a substitute for love. It is an agreement to walk life honestly without pretending to be more than you are. All older men try to hold everything together. By a certain age, holding things together becomes part of the routine. Some days you wake up already solving problems that have not even shown up yet. You want plans to work, people to stay reasonable, and effort to count for something. But life rarely follows neat plans, especially when no one is sharing the load with you. I once knew a man who spent years trying to fix everyone he loved. The more he tried, the more distant they became, until he noticed how tired he had become from carrying the problems that were never his to solve. Somehow, fixing things became his love language. Have you ever noticed how quietly you stepped into that role? After years of staying emotionally available, one day it hits you that you are carrying responsibilities that were never yours to own. It shows up in ordinary places. Bills left on the table that are not really yours. Papers you keep meaning to sort through for someone else. Keys you keep holding on to just in case someone might need them. Without realizing it, you became the emergency contact without ever signing up for it. At this point in your life, you deserve a life that finally belongs to you. Stopping does not feel natural at first. It feels unfamiliar. But eventually you have to let things go or it slowly drains your focus. It feels like discovering you have been holding a map for a journey that was never yours to plan. It is often the only way they grow. Once your days feel lighter, the old role quietly lets go of you. And many men are surprised by how much strength returns once they stop carrying what was never theirs. Why older men stop running and start listening. I once saw an old man sitting alone in a park. He was simply there, watching the wind carry fallen leaves across his shoes. He did not look important or impressive. He just looked settled. Nothing about him asked for attention, yet nothing about him felt missing. Like drinking your coffee in the morning without rushing through it. Being single gave him room to notice what was already there. Nothing new, just easier to stay with. This calm isn't a reward. It's what remains when distraction no longer works. Most men don't stop running because they are wise. They stop because their body refuses to keep pretending. How direction shows up through contribution. Many older men discover that life keeps moving even when no one is walking beside them. And sooner or later, they start wondering what makes their days feel worthwhile. Sometimes direction shows up through small things you keep doing because they still feel useful. Henry, a retired engineer, spent his mornings helping neighbors fix small household problems they could not figure out. He laughed that the problems were simple, but the gratitude never felt routine. He said, "I thought I missed my career, but it turned out I just missed feeling useful." He used to wonder how to fill his free time. Now he knows there are plenty of people who can use his help. Some men reach for connection when loneliness shows up. Without seeing that direction usually comes first. You can be around people and still feel distant when nothing you offer feels personal. Older single men often build meaning through what they contribute, not who stands next to them. And over time, that shift changes how the world responds to them. When you look back on your life, were your happiest moments the ones where you gave the most? Why discipline matters more when you have no girlfriend. Most people mistake chaos for momentum. When you don't have a partner, your days no longer get automatic feedback. That's why daily structure starts to matter more. Some days shift from clear to rough, but you still show up looking put together, not scattered. Life often feels easier when your habits follows a simple pattern. When there is no one beside you to offer daily reminders, your day moves forward when you decide to move first. Otis woke up 15 minutes earlier just to make his bed, stretch, and watch the sunrise. He said it wasn't about productivity. It was about remembering he had power over the first moment of his day. Those first 15 minutes often set the pace for what comes next. A steady rhythm keeps your days from drifting. Motivation comes and goes. Discipline is what keeps your days from quietly falling apart. Most of the time, you don't notice it until it's gone. There were years when things felt genuinely hard, without encouragement from anyone. Some days meant swallowing emotion, keeping your head down, and taking the next step anyway. Without a steady routine, his days would have slowly lost their shape. When things finally feel easy, discipline is what keeps you from slipping into habits that don't serve you. Sometimes it just means not letting a comfortable couch make your decisions for you, even when no one would notice if you skipped it. That couch has a stronger opinion than most people, and it never pays rent. Try this instead. Every morning, complete one tiny task you could easily avoid. Because if you can bring order to the smallest corner of your world, you can face any storm outside it. For older men, discipline isn't self-improvement. It's what helps your life keep its direction when you're not sharing each day with a partner. Why some older men feel lonelier when everyone likes them. Some men become everyone's favorite presence without ever feeling close to anyone. They are easy to like, easy to rely on, and hard to truly reach. Robin Williams, a world-famous comedian known for bringing laughter to millions, spent much of his life entertaining others while privately struggling with his own sense of closeness. Being surrounded did not always mean being understood. Not a tragedy, but a mirror. A reminder that you can bring joy to everyone and still feel empty when the crowd fades. I once knew a man like him. Always the comforter, the entertainer, the reliable friend. He was everyone's favorite person to call, yet rarely the one anyone checked on. He joked that his phone was busy, even when his evenings were not. He admitted that quieter moments made him question how much of his joy actually belonged to him. That's what happens when you confuse being needed with being known. One brings comfort. The other asks for presence. Being liked feels warm. Being known feels risky. And many men choose the first without noticing what the second might offer. If that sounds familiar, don't flinch. It just means your heart still cares. Over time, you start noticing that attention comes easily, but closeness does not. That gap is where many men begin to feel tired without knowing why. So if you find yourself giving too much, trying too hard, smiling too wide, pause. And one question slowly becomes harder to ignore. Who actually knows you beyond the role you play? And how often do you give others a version of you that never gets to rest? Because there's a kind of joy that comes from not having to impress anyone, even for a moment. It is like slipping into a light shirt at home, easier to breathe than wearing a tailored suit all day. And noticing that difference changes how you start choosing people in moments. Living without a girlfriend does not mean life passed you by. It means fewer distractions are left to hide behind. Your habits, your everyday decisions, the parts of you that quietly stayed consistent. Some men rush to replace that silence, not because they need someone, but because silence stopped agreeing with their story. What follows is not a louder life, but a steadier one. For many men, this becomes one of the most grounded chapters they've ever lived. If this felt uncomfortably familiar, that is not a coincidence. It means this is not the first video you needed to hear, and it will not be the last. Because once you see life this way, you start noticing things most people walk past every day. And those are the men this channel is for. This channel is for men who are ready to stop filling space and start living inside it. And once a man learns to live this way, he rarely wants to go back.